It is infantry tactics and formations used in a way that benefits you, the underdog, versus the state Goliath with all the cool toys. Okay, let's break this definition apart. Small unit just means that most guerrilla ops will be conducted with relatively small groups of force. Think along the line of fire teams and squads. What kind of offensive operation can you pull off with a fire team or a squad? Well, think raids and ambushes and attacks on enemy systems and infrastructure. Your targets will be carefully selected to take into consideration your limited firepower on the ground and the advantages of total surprise. You will harass the enemy, strike where he is weak, become invisible where he is strong. Why do you think guerrilla war emphasizes the offensive? Okay, if you are running around in squads and fire teams, maybe even platoons, to be on the defensive means that you are fixed in one location, the enemy knows where you were at, and they're preparing to roll over you with everything they've got. Not a good position to be in for a G-Force commander. If you get forced into the defensive too much, you probably won't make it to tomorrow's battlefield. So guerrillas only fight when they have the ability to take the advantage swiftly, hit, and get the hell out as fast as possible. Think about the American Revolution. The colonists didn't have any luck trying to fight the British toe-to-toe, force-on-force in the fields like they used to fight back then, lining up and shooting at each other across 50 meters. It wasn't until the colonists started ambushing and running away, acting like American Indians in combat, that the war started to turn in the colony's favor. We didn't make any headway against the British Army until we started acting like guerrillas. A case could be made that the original American Revolution was as much a guerrilla conflict as it was a conventional one. Rest assured that the next American Revolution, the Second American Revolution, will largely be a guerrilla war as well, if we allow it to progress into Phase 2. If it does go there, it will make the first one look like a square dance, trust me. We've got a lot better weapon systems today than cap and ball muskets. It will be a horrendous conflict, make no doubt about that. The group energy expended in its prosecution will be titanic, and if we can wrap these criminals up nice and tidy during Phase 1, we should do everything in our power to do so. We don't want to have to be forced to go into conducting Phase 2 activities in order to win our freedoms back. Okay, remember all those grassroots political activities we were emphasizing in Phase 1? Well, now those rosters become the machinery of the resistance groupings known as the auxiliary and the underground. The resistance movement during Phase 2 is constructed of three components: the Gs, or the guerrillas, the auxiliary, and the underground. The Gs are the military arm of the resistance. The auxiliary is the combat service and support unit for the guerrillas. The underground is the resistance Black Ops wing, the OSS corps of the resistance movement. The fourth, and probably the most important component in this picture, both for the state under siege and the resistance movement as well, is the general population. The apathy or favoritism towards the resistance by the population, a large majority of the population, is absolutely essential to the survival of the resistance. Okay, so that means you better not conduct yourselves like terrorists, using the general population for bomb practice in order to terrorize them into cowing acceptance of your legitimacy to overcome the current state apparatus and replace it. Engage in these acts and you become the enemy. There is no justification under any circumstances to use terrorism against the same population you are supposedly fighting for the liberty of. This is what false flaggers do, and that alerts us to the real pedigree of their goals and where their support comes from. The most shocking current example of the artificial resistance movement in action is what's been going on in Libya. That resistance movement did not spring up indigenously among the Libyan population. It was imported from Saudi Arabia using al-Qaeda mercenaries to populate the guerrilla force. A movement such as this is not a real resistance movement, rather it is a terrorist movement, an artificially created one to boot. Alright, Phase 3, or the go phase. The line between ready and go is clearly marked by this event. 50% plus of the population is now in the streets actively rebelling against the state and fighting alongside the resistance. It's an open civil insurrection. Now the state really is doomed because the majority of the ruled are outside their homes, chasing the state through the streets and off the land with burning torches and pitchforks. Picture the scene in Frankenstein when the villagers storm Castle Frankenstein and burn it to the ground. That's a good motif to represent the activities of Phase 3. If the resistance makes it through Phase 2 and transitions to Phase 3, under the conditions I've outlined which mark the transitions between the phases, then the resistance is pretty much assured a successful victory over the enemy state. So you make it this far, kid, you will win. The key, mentioned earlier, the key task of the resistance, which I'm going to cover in the next video, to getting to Phase 3, is that you've disseminated your message of liberty to the individuals in society successfully. The masses of individuals have now owned up to the fact that the state only rules by their granting the consent to be ruled. The masses have now withdrawn their consent and are backing up their decision with the rampaging use of defensive force. In the very beginning, the resistance will only represent a small percentage of the total number of the ruled, like 5 to 10%. In the end, it will be almost everybody. A goodly number of that almost everybody were groveling surrender monkeys in the beginning, figuring that if they licked boots and hid under their beds, the state wouldn't notice them and thus let them exist unmolested. It will only be when these cowards perceive that the majority tide is washing the state away do they come out in the open in support of the resistance and morph into die-hard patriots when there is safety in numbers. It is a sad fact of humanity to acknowledge this characteristic of the species, but it will happen like this, and it already is. Leading into the final days of Phase 2, and all the way through Phase 3, the guerrillas will transition in size and organization to bona fide conventional infantry units. The guerrilla numbers are now numerically equal to or superior to the size of the state's military and police units. So, the guerrilla army in Phase 3 is no longer hitting and getting. Rather, it is chasing, fixing, and destroying the enemy state all over the contested territory. The guerrillas are now focusing on the goal of all conventional warfare, which is taking ground and keeping it. Once the forces of the state have been neutralized or turned over to the cause of the resistance, the war is pretty much over, and that's when Reconstruction can begin, and that's when the focus of the efforts of the resistance can be on going after the true perpetrators of tyranny, which are the ringleaders of the New World Order. But in order to get to those guys, you have to get through their defenses first, okay? And in a Phase 2, Phase 3 situation, their protection is going to be the actual military and police units of the state in contest. So you have to defeat that first before you can go to the next step, which is, rounding up the guilty and making them face the music for their crimes. So that's it for the phases of resistance. I hope you found this illuminating, and the next video will cover the key to victory, the key task of the resistance, how to win it in Phase 1. Alright, I'll see you there.